This is Andi Purewal for ID Boxing. I'm joined by Frank Smith here in London. Frank, firstly, how are you?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's good to be in London. I was going to go to Australia, but with Baumgardner being rescheduled, I thought I'd be here to support the champ going in there, become unified champ, go and win Michaela Mayer's belts off her.
Let's obviously start with that one. Alicia Baumgardner, Michaela Mayer. Who's just throwing that at me? Alicia Baumgardner, Michaela Mayer, Saturday night. What does Alicia have to do to be successful in this fight?
I think she's got to go in there and show the aggression like she showed in the Terry Harper fight. She came here then and shocked a lot of people, getting that win. She showed what she's about. She came over again a bit late notice in her last fight, but I think you only have to look at her. She's a true professional. She stays on weight constantly and ready to go. So I think it's going to be a great fight. But I think honestly, Alicia Baumgardner is going to do the business.
The build-up to it's been kind of non-stop, and he's certainly kept everybody entertained. Frank, I'm sure on another scenario you'd have loved to have been a part of it in terms of involved promoting it. But what have you made of it all as an outsider, rather looking in?
No, I think it's been great between the two of them. It's kind of a shame because they're both American that it's great as part of the card, but it would have been a great headline in the US as well for Top Rank. We worked with Top Rank to deliver this fight, and it's. Bearing in mind it's chief support, this could easily be a main event in its own right. And, obviously got Savannah Marshall, Clarissa Shields on the top of the bill. It's a great fight.
Frank, moving away from this, obviously one obvious topic, which I'm sure you've been asked about a few times today, is Conor Benn's positive VADA test last week. Now, we never had a chance to speak on the back of that, so let's just go back to it. What did you make of how the events unfolded firstly? Somebody who was there in the middle of it all, mixed in it all, what did you make of how everything unfolded last week?
Look, I think... ultimately it's easy for people to judge. I think all I'd ask is you've got a young man in Conor Benn who's got a tough road ahead of him and a fight ahead of him, and he wants to clear his name. So, like other athletes, other boxers who have been in the position in the past, allow him that process to do so. And if he is clear and he gets cleared, then speak on it. But I think we're so. The mentality now is just to jump to a conclusion of that's it, must be, But allow him the process that other people have been allowed, and that's all I'd say, because he's a young man who, it's not going to be an easy time for him. So that's all I'd say on Conor's position.
Of course, Conor's got his own right to reply, as you say, and I imagine he'll have a few words to come out in the near future. But just to kind of go back to it, Frank, why did it take for the Daily Mail article to come out for everybody to be made aware of what was going on? Other than the two teams involved and obviously the board, it raised questions as to whether or not the fight would have gone on if it wasn't for that article that got leaked. Not leaked, but obviously the news got leaked.
I think ultimately it's a process that the British Boxing Board of Control, the regulatory body who decide matters in this sport in terms of these types of matters, whether to sanction the event, whether to not. It was their job or their decision to pull the fight. People spoke about us, looking to go to High Court, looking to bring in another sanctioning or regulatory body to run the event. That's not what we wanted to do. That's not what we were going to do. But it was just about process being played out. And you can't just go, click your fingers, go, right, done. Make a decision. It doesn't work like that. You've got tons of different people involved, legal ramifications on any which route you look at things, and things have to be done in the right way and the right manner. So, I think the board the board made their decision. They'd been aware of it, and then they made their decision. Ultimately, probably shouldn't have been 72 hours before the event. But like I say, all we wanted was Conor Benn to be afforded due process. In truth.
Would the fight have gone ahead if nobody found out about the VADA test?
I think, again, it comes down to due process and the British Boxing Board of Control going through that and making their final decision. They made their final decision. It's not up to you, Wasserman, to decide whether the fight goes ahead, because the fighters, essentially, so in this case, Chris Eubank Jr., had the opportunity, and people will say, he shouldn't be in that position because he wants to fight. Yeah, he's got people around him to help him make that decision. Independent scientific and medical advice that they had taken themselves and all parties had. But again, it comes down to the British Boxing Board of Control's decision. They made their decision, and so that's it.
So what made the board have effectively a U-turn from when they found out about the results a couple of weeks ago to then last week saying they didn't want to sanction the fight?
No, that's a process they went through internally as the British Boxing Board.
Why did it take them obviously like 2 weeks to change their mind?
That's not for us to, like, I can't tell you what process the British Boxing Board of Control went through. They went through an independent process themselves. All we asked is, like I say, to have the independent the process for Conor Benn. At that time or now, at least give him that opportunity now to have that process.
As you said, it wasn't maybe the best idea, or it wasn't ideal rather, for it to have taken up until 72 hours before the fight to pull it. But on that note, how damaging of a look do you feel that it brought to the sport? Because he had the world's eyes on boxing last week as the news and the story continued to unravel. How damaging of a look do you feel it brought?
Again, I think everyone has to be aware of all the information, which right now, because of the various legal, proceedings that will be going on and discussions that will be going on, people can't have all of that detail. So again, just like I'm saying about Conor Benn being given that due process to, clear his name, we have to have that with the rest of it because people don't understand the information around it. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, last week was great for the sport, but at the same time, we need to go through a process now.
The B sample, Frank, what's the latest with that?
That's with Conor Benn's legal team. He's independently. We don't represent Conor Benn on on the drug testing and the doping side of things. He has independent legal advice on that, and that's a process that they'll be dealing with now with the British Boxing Board of Control.
Obviously, Frank, I'm sure you've seen kind of old videos of Eddie circulating all of 2 weeks prior to that, saying, if you're not going to take note of VADA testing, what is the point in doing any form of testing at all? What's the difference between that and obviously the results coming back with Conor and still pushing to try to get the fight on up until late last week when it was pulled?
Because there would have been more detail and reasoning and advice around it from various independent parties. But again, I'm sure we've all said things in the past that then are different, especially in this sport, it happens all the time. I can't speak on the difference. Ultimately, VADA testing was something that the fighters and Conor Benn enlisted for. Voluntary anti-doping, random testing, he enlisted for it, Conor Benn. So he wanted it and he was aware. So I think I can understand where he says, certain elements where you don't know the background of the testing, that can change people's mindset. And maybe where he's pointed to that in the past. I saw something about like Stephen Espinosa saying about a certain thing, but again, they allowed it that went ahead because of certain reasons. Just like we're saying on the other side, I don't know the reasoning for this person's drug testing or this person, or why they failed a drug test, or what subsequently happened here. But when you're involved in the overall matter, you have a bit more information, so you can speak on it with a bit more clarity. But everyone has their position. Like I say, go back to that. He'll say, when this happened, the reason we allowed the fights out, or the reason the fight wouldn't happen, was because of X, Y, Z. So every situation is different.
Frank, there were reports that came out a couple of days ago that there was another positive test in Conor's case from earlier on in the year. Can you elaborate or give me any information on that?
No, not really. I mean, again, the whole anti-doping piece around Conor is a legal situation that's ongoing. And like I say, I'm not going to talk on his test. Ultimately, that's a process he's going through now.
On that front then, and on Conor's front in terms of how he wants to go about trying to clear his name, when can we expect something to come from him or from the teams to let everybody know where they stand?
Look, he's working tirelessly, not him, but the people around him, independent medical specialists who understand these matters. Everyone in the world now is an expert with everything, and knows everything about everything. These people that are enlisted on multiple different sides are going away now to look into it, and it's a process that will go on, and it can't really be spoken about too much because there is a legal process ongoing. And as you know, with legal matters, not just in this case but others, they have to stay confidential. But that's something, ultimately the sooner the better for Conor Benn, because it's a hard time for him. And as this drags on, as this goes on, it's going to be harder for him. So they're working tirelessly to come back from there.
Has the releasing of that article a couple of days ago maybe slowed up the process of Conor releasing a statement or something from the team just to say as to where they stand?
No, I think you have to understand Conor is being advised, ultimately the process that is being gone through is for the good of his long-term career, ultimately. And, if found correct by various parties, then what he's doing now by waiting, ultimately, of course, he wants to come out and say what he wants to say, but he has to follow this process, and his legal advisors will be talking him through that matter. He'll want to come out as soon as possible, and as soon as I'm sure there's news that can be shared, once the legal process has been through, then it will be.
Just another thing I want to touch on is Eubank Jr.'s weight. Now, obviously, we saw him go on to make weight in his videos over social media, but a lot of people have said he didn't look great, shall we say. He looked drained. I'm sure he might disagree with that, but in photos we saw is how he looked. What were your thoughts on kind of his stature in those photos, firstly?
I mean, the picture I saw the next day when he'd been training, he looked absolutely ripped to shreds, didn't he? He was actually my summer body for next year. Pinned it up on the wall. But look, he's a true professional, Chris Eubank Jr. He's all this, videos of posting, eating food, etc. He takes it very seriously. He takes his career seriously, and he would have made weight. I think he was 159.3 on the Saturday morning, and bear in mind that was after 2 nights of eating. Of sort of being out. So, he was 159 in his fight against Liam Williams. So all this talk about the weight, it wasn't, that weigh-in was that fight was at 160, and he came in at 159. So that doesn't strike me as someone who struggles to make 160.
On that note, on the weight front, Eddie had said that the weight clause for the next day was around similar to the IBF limit. You Junior said that he made weight in his video on the next day, which would suggest it was around 160, so only £3 added advantage. Yeah.
I think he was just trying to say, look, I'm a professional, even after eating and drinking over the last couple of days, since the fight had been called off. Look at me, I'm still under 160. It wasn't, the rehydration wasn't 160.
Just away from that topic, obviously, Frank, just get your thoughts on a couple of other things. Fury-Chisora. Talk to me about that one, Frank. How long has that one been in the pipeline?
The trilogy, the long-term coming trilogy. I don't know. I think they're still working through it now. I think there's ongoing discussions around it. It's been going on for the last week, 10 days, 2 weeks. I think. Obviously, he's represented by 258 and AJ's management company. So let's see.
Were those discussions ongoing whilst the AJ talks were ongoing?
It's more a discussion that would have been happening with 258. I think there was multiple discussions in parallel to the AJ discussions, which are I'm not going to say I'm not surprised by, because that's the same process you always go through. Whenever there's a fight of that magnitude, you need other things lined up.
Final one, Dillian Whyte. What's the latest?
Hopefully, update soon. Aim is to get him back out there, get something announced, and Eddie's pointed towards it a few times, but let's see. Hopefully, an update very soon.
Frank, appreciate your time. Thanks for speaking to me in ID Boxing.
Cheers, mate. Good to see you.